This video explains a section of human reproduction for the biology syllabus. So I know some of the writing, like over here, is a little bit small, but I'm going to speak through it, so you won't really need to see all the writing. So if we look at reproduction, there's two ways that reproduction occurs. It's either asexual or sexual. What we're focusing on today, obviously, is sexual because we're talking about human reproduction. So if we look at asexual, the gametes don't fuse. You only need one parent, and the offspring is genetically identical. So this would be mitosis. You can either do natural vegetative reproduction in terms of plants, or we can do artificial ways to do vegetative propagation. Natural vegetative reproduction could be rhizomes, bulbs, corms, or tubers. Artificial ways to do it would be cutting, layering, marketing, grafting, and tissue culture. For sexual reproduction, this is when two gametes fuse to form a zygote. Usually it requires two parents, and it's very important to note that these parents must be of the same species. Offspring is genetically unique, and this involves mitosis and meiosis. So we can do sexual reproduction in plants with different parts of the flower, the gametes of the flower being found in the pollen grains from the anther or in the ovum from the ovules. And then fertilization occurs and it forms a zygote. In animals, we have the male sex organ, which is the testes, and we have the male gametes and the male sex hormones, testosterone. In the female sex organ, which is the ovaries, we have the female gamete, the egg, and the female sex hormones, progesterone and estrogen. The sperm and the egg will fuse, so the two gametes will fuse to form during fertilization, and again they'll form a zygote. So we know that if there's a zygote and a fertilization is occurring, it must be sexual reproduction. Some of the differences, we briefly spoke about them, but for asexual reproduction, you only need one parent. Sexual, you need two. Asexual reproduction produces genetically identical offspring, where sexual is genetically different or genetically unique offspring. Asexual reproduction only involves mitosis. Sexual reproduction is mitosis and meiosis. So when we look at the human reproductive system, the key questions we've got to keep asking ourselves is, what is the main function of the male reproductive system? And how does the female reproductive system allow fertilization and birth to happen? Quick cartoon. We're going to look first at the male reproductive organs. We're going to look at their structure and their function and how their structure benefits their function. If you look at a front view of a male reproductive system, and there's an insert of a longitudinal section through the testes and the ducts around the testes. You should be able to label a simple diagram of a male reproductive system. So we have the ureters over here, we have the bladder. These aren't really part of the reproductive system, but obviously they are going to be most of the time shown in the diagram. We also have the sperm duct or the vas deferens. Sorry, these labels are a little bit shifted up. We have the prostate gland, we have the urethra, we have the penis, we have the scrotum, the testes, and we have the Cowper's glands and the seminal vesicles. Then these are seminiferous tubules in the testes. So first, looking at the all the different parts of the male reproductive system, we'll start with the scrotum. This is this pouch-like structure or the sac-like structure containing the testes inside it. The functions of the scrotum are twofold. First, the scrotum must regulate the temperature of the testes. The testes need to be about 2 or 3 degrees lower temperature than the inside body temperature in order to produce fertile sperm. So that's why the scrotum allows the testes to hang outside the body to keep the temperature slightly lower. And the scrotum, of course, also protects the sperm. Then if we look at the testes, obviously males have two testes, a singular testis. We can also talk about testicle, but they usually use testis. Testicles are glandular gonads in the male. So glandular means that they secrete hormones. We spoke about this a little bit in the endocrine system. And the specific hormone they secrete would be testosterone. The word gonads is quite important. A gonad is a sex organ or an organ that produces sex cells. So in males, the gonad would be the testes as they produce the sperm. The testes are two oval-shaped structures suspended outside the body in the scrotum. The function, continuing in the structure of the testes, if we look at slightly more detail, they contain highly folded tubules, highly convoluted tubules that are lined with cells which form spermatozoa, so immature sperm or sperm. The function of the testes being folded or convoluted is that it increases the surface area for the maximum amount of sperm produced. These tubules are known as seminiferous tubules. There's around 1,000 per testis, and the total length of the tubules is over 500 meters, which is really long. And it allows the tubules to produce 200 to 500 million sperm per ejaculation. So between each tubule is groups of endocrine cells, so the cells that secrete testosterone, and these are called interstitial cells. The functions of the testes are, again, twofold. Firstly, they must produce sperm, which is the male gametes, and these are produced by the germinal epithelial cells lining the seminiferous tubules. The second function is to produce testosterone, produced by the interstitial cells, which are found in between the seminiferous tubules. Then we look at the ducts of the male reproductive system. Ducts are hollow transport vessels. There are 3 ducts in the male reproductive system: the epididymis, the sperm duct, and the urethra. The epididymis is formed when the seminiferous tubules join together to form the epididymis, and it's again a highly convoluted, so a highly folded tube, about 5 meters long. The function of it being folded is that so it increases surface area, so that sperm can spend quite a long time in here. And we'll see that they need to spend time in here to mature and grow. The functions of the epididymis. So immature sperm enter the epididymis and they're stored here for a few months. They become mature when they're in here, so they become motile, so they can move, and fertile, so they can perform fertilization and reproduction. They're stored here for several months at a time. If they stay longer, they're just broken down by the epithelial cells in the seminiferous tubules, and then they get reabsorbed into the body. Then the sperm duct, which is this duct over here, it's also called the vas deferens, so you can use either name interchangeably. The sperm duct is a muscular tube, which is a continuation of the epididymis. It pushes the mature sperm forward along the tube due to strong peristaltic waves from the epididymis to the urethra and then out, and this is called ejaculation. So a peristaltic wave is a strong contraction of the smooth muscles in the walls of the ducts. So as the muscles contract, the sperm is pushed along and towards the urethra and then to the exterior. The urethra starts here, so the vas deferens continues from the epididymis here. We have the sperm duct up there, and just below the bladder, it changes to the urethra. So the urethra is the duct at the end of the urogenital system, so uro with urine and genital with gametes and reproductive organs, and it leads to the exterior of the body. It forms a common duct for the transportation of semen and urine. So both semen and urine are transported out the urethra, but obviously they never occur at the same time. If we then look at some of the glands, we have the prostate gland located below the bladder. It's about walnut sized, and we often hear something called prostate cancer, which happens when this prostate gland gets infected with cancerous cells. So as a male ages, this gland can enlarge and it can exert pressure on the urethra, which slows down emptying of the bladder, and the prostate gland can be removed surgically. Just ignore these notes here, they're just me talking to myself about the other notes I have. The function of the prostate gland. The prostate gland secretes a fluid that aids in the transportation of sperm. So it allows the sperm to be transported more efficiently. This fluid contains enzymes that make the sperm more active, so they give the sperm energy and allow them to be more mobile. And it makes up about 1/3 of seminal fluid. We know that semen, which we'll talk about later, is sperm as well as seminal fluid. Then if we look at the seminal vesicles, so we have the prostate gland here, and now we have the seminal vesicles. These are sac-like pouches attaching to the vas deferens, the sperm duct, near the base of the bladder. The functions of the seminal vesicles are to produce a sugar-rich fluid called fructose that provides the sperm with energy to help them move. So just as the prostate gland allows the sperm to become more active. The seminal vesicles also allow the sperm to have more energy. This fluid, this fructose fluid, makes up about 60% of seminal fluid or ejaculatory fluid. And then the last gland we have are the Cowper's glands. These are a little bit harder to see. They aren't on all the diagrams. As you can see, the Cowper's glands aren't pictured here, but they're found just at the base of the penis and open into the urethra. The functions of the Cowper's gland is to secrete an alkaline or mucus-like fluid when the male is sexually aroused. This fluid has two functions. Firstly, it neutralizes acidic urine, which may be present in the urethra, because we know that the urethra transports both urine and sperm. Obviously, the sperm would be damaged or killed by a very acidic urine, so the alkaline fluid from the Cowper's glands neutralizes this so that it doesn't damage the sperm. This fluid also lubricates the urethra because you can see it's mucus-like, and the external opening, which protects the sperm from mechanical damage or friction. Another very important part of the male reproductive system would be the penis. This is the male external organ, and it consists of spongy tissue or erectile tissue that runs the length of the penis. The structure of the penis is quite complicated, but I do recommend that you learn it. Running the length of the penis, there are 3 sections of erectile tissue. So 2 are on the dorsal side, which is towards the back, the corpus cavernosa, and both of them are the corpus cavernosa. And the one on the ventral side is called the corpus spongiosum. The primary mechanism that brings about an erection is the dilation of the dorsal and the central arteries. So here's the central arteries, and there's the dorsal arteries. And these supply blood to the penis. So as they dilate, they expand, and blood rushes into the penis, causing the penis to become stiff and erect. We'll go into the process of erection a little bit later. So as we said, an erection is the dilation of the dorsal and central arteries. It allows more blood to fill these 3 spongy erectile chambers, the corpus spongiosum and cavernosa, and it causes the penis to stiffen and lengthen. Without an erection, a male can't transfer sperm into the female's vagina, so fertilization can't occur. The function of the penis is to deposit semen into the female's vagina during sexual intercourse. This allows the sperm to be brought closer to the egg for fertilization, which increases the chances of fertilization. In the top of the penis is the foreskin. It's a very sensitive head of the penis, which is protected by the foreskin. It can be removed by circumcision, which is done for religious and cultural reasons, or because the foreskin is simply too tight. That's just a diagram. You can cut this out, print it out, and practice it if you want. Practice labeling the different structures of the male reproductive system. This is a more complicated diagram. Sorry, the quality is not the best. The same, but now a dorsal view. The difference between erection and ejaculation is quite important to know. Erection is when the penis stiffens and becomes hard, it lengthens. Ejaculation is when the semen is actually expelled out of the male body, or out of the penis. And again, the difference between sperm and semen is also very important to learn. Sperm is the microscopic male reproductive cell. So sperm is the actual gamete. We know it looks like a little head with a tail. Whereas semen is a seminal fluid containing millions of sperm cells. So semen is a seminal fluid coming from the Cowper's gland, the prostate gland, and the seminal vesicles. And it also contains sperm cells. So how does an erection occur? We know that the penis has 2 chambers, well, actually 3, filled with spongy tissue running the length of the penis. The spongy tissue is composed of smooth muscles, fibrous tissue, spaces, arteries, and veins. And altogether, the spongy tissue is called the erectile tissue. Over here is the urethra, and these are the 2 central arteries. When the male is relaxed, these arteries are constricted. That means that not a lot of blood is running through the penis. And the smooth muscles within the blood vessels, or regulating the blood vessels, are contracted. This allows not a lot of blood to come in because they're quite small, they're not open wide. During arousal, so when the male is not relaxed, the parasympathetic nervous system signals the relaxation of the smooth muscles in the penis. This allows them to dilate as they relax, which means that blood flows into the penis and floods the spongy tissue. Now, don't get confused between the fact that when a male is relaxed, these arteries are constricted, and when a male is aroused, the arteries are relaxed, or the muscles are relaxed. So as the blood floods the penis, these tissues expand and creates quite a high pressure within the penis. This then squeezes the veins, which drain out the penis, and they prevent blood from leaving and draining out the penis, resulting in a rigid penis. To deliver sperm cells from the female to the female reproductive system, the penis has to release semen into the vaginal cavity, and this is ejaculation. So what we spoke about here was an erection. Now we spoke about ejaculation. It begins with the contraction of the vas deferens, so the contraction of the sperm duct, propelling sperm from the epididymis to the top of the vas deferens. Then the sperm passes all the ducts and it gets some seminal fluid. Then as the peristaltic waves continue, sperm is ejected down the urethra and into the vaginal canal. Ejaculation is controlled by the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. Now we can look at the female reproductive organs. This is a ventral view and a longitudinal section. So we can see the oviducts, or the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, the vagina, the cervix, and the uterus. And we can see the bladder here and the anus at the back, and the reproductive organs is kind of situated between them. Try and know these labels. These ones you don't have to be stressed about quite as much, but know the main labels quite well. These are just more diagrams. So if we start with the ovaries are glandular reproductive organs in the females. The ovaries are the female gonads, so they produce the female sex cells, the ova. And they also, because they're glandular, they secrete hormones such as progesterone and estrogen. They're almond-shaped and they're found in the pelvic cavity, which we saw here in the pelvic cavity, so that they can be protected by the pelvis. They're held in position by ligaments connecting to the uterus. The functions of the ovaries are to store and release eggs. So eggs are formed when a female is in the womb, and then they're stored there and released on a monthly basis after puberty. The ovaries also produce hormones, estrogen and progesterone. If we then look at the fallopian tubes, they're also often called the oviducts, and they're muscular tubes lined with cilia, which are like tiny little hair-like structures. The function of the muscular tubes is to contract to move the egg along, and the function of the cilia is again to move the ovum along. So both of these structures aid in the transport of the ovum. The fallopian tubes stretch from the ovary to the uterus, and they end in a funnel-like structure called the infundibulum, which has finger-like outgrowths called fimbria. This is a zoomed-in picture. So this whole thing is the infundibulum, and these little structures are fimbria. The functions of the fallopian tube is obviously to provide a pathway between the uterus and the ovary for the egg's sperm and the zygote. So the egg would move along here, the sperm would be ejected into the vaginal canal, would swim up the uterus and into the fallopian tube, and usually fertilization will occur somewhere here in the fallopian tube. Once fertilization is occurred, it is now a zygote, which then moves along the fallopian tube towards the uterus, and if everything goes well, implants itself in the uterine wall. So as I said, fallopian tubes are the site of fertilization and the start of cell division, where this fused egg and sperm form a cell, and then cell division occurs. The fallopian tubes also enable the egg or the zygote to move towards the uterus through this the muscles and the cilia. So just in terms of terminology, we start with the zygote. As it divides, it becomes a blastocyte. It then becomes an embryo, and it then becomes a fetus. When the baby's features become visible, we start calling it a fetus. If we then look at the uterus, this is quite an important structure. It is hollow, pear-shaped, thick-walled, and muscular, and each of these structures have a specific function. It is found between the bladder and the rectum, and it enlarges considerably during birth, but then it transforms back to its original size. So we can see that it's elastic. The bottom part of the uterus projects into the vagina, and we call this the cervix. During birth, we call the cervix the birth canal. Sorry, during birth, we call the vagina the birth canal. Usually the opening of the cervix is like 2.5 millimeters. It's tiny, but it has to dilate to 10 centimeters during birth. So the uterus consists of two walls in the uterine wall. We have the myometrium, which is the muscular wall, and we need the wall to be thick so that it can stretch when a baby develops inside it, and it needs to be elastic, again, so it can stretch and then return to its original size. We also have the endometrium, which is the second layer of the uterine wall, and this is the layer closest to the inside, the hollow inside of the uterus. This layer is richly supplied with blood vessels, and this is where the zygote implants itself. It is richly supplied with blood vessels to provide nutrients for the baby, and it forms part of the placenta. So during your period, you lose only the endometrium, you don't lose the myometrium. The functions of the uterus is, of course, to provide a site of implantation for the blastocyte to implant, develop, and grow. And the uterus also contracts during birth to enable the baby to be pushed out. And this is the myometrium, those muscular walls that are working. This is just a diagram to show the development of the zygote as it's released from the ovary. It becomes fertilized to form the zygote. It moves along and then eventually implants in the uterus. If we then look at the vagina, also called the birth canal, so during birth we call it the birth canal, and other times we simply call it the vagina. It's again a muscular passage between the uterus and the outside of the body. It has elastic folded walls, so it allows it to stretch during intercourse and during childbirth, and then return to its original shape. And another important structure of the vagina is that its pH is quite acidic to keep it healthy and infection-free. The function of the vagina is, of course, to provide a place where sperm are deposited during sexual intercourse, and it forms the birth canal during birth where the baby is pushed out. We can then look at the vulva and the clitoris, which are the external structures of the vagina, and they play no role in the reproductive process. So this is just a summary of the male reproductive system, and this is a summary of the female reproductive system.